Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Jimmy Dietrich.
Ginny, do you trust me?
I do actually,
Wow.
very much.
That's probably your first mistake of many on this episode.
Well, you know,
So, no, we're going to talk about trust today. And we're not,
we are.
not
But before we
crazy
do
trust.
that,
Oh, boy. Oh,
before
I
we
know
do
what's
that, I
coming.
have an announcement to make.
Hmm.
Happy birthday!
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When people listen to this, that will be well in the past. But
Yeah,
for
but you know,
now,
when
it's a
we're
day in the
recording it,
future.
it's tomorrow, right?
Correct. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I appreciate even more that you're not going to sing to me. So
No,
we'll move
you don't
on.
want me to sing.
No, no. Just as I do not sing to you, you will not sing to me, and all will be good, and we'll continue to trust each other.
Fair. All right.
So
Okay,
trust.
trust.
I see a recurring theme with a lot of agency owners that either explicitly or implicitly they do not trust some or all of their team. And if you ask them that, most of them will not say, well, it's not that I don't trust them. It's that I just don't know if they can do this, or, I need to keep an eye on this, or all of these things. But I think trust is fundamental to any relationship. I think it is critically important to the relationship between an employer and an employee. And the trust needs to go beyond, well, I trust they're not going to steal from me. I trust they're not going to, do something
Yep.
directly harmful. It means you need to trust them to do their job on a
Right.
daily basis. And
Right.
if you do not trust them, you need to do something to address that.
Yeah, I think that not trusting your team is a symptom of a larger problem. And the larger problem is usually things like I'm a perfectionist. I can't give up control. I want things done exactly my way. That is the trust piece is a symptom of those things. And as agent, and this is something we continue to talk about on the show, and I think we both talk to advise with our clients is if you're going to trust your team, you have to trust them to do the job that you hired them to do. And one of the things I see is that somebody will start and the agency's owner is really excited about their new hire and they are going to do this and this and this together. And 30 days or 60 days or 90 days later, they're completely disenchanted. And it's because they haven't been honest with themselves about what that role is and what those expectations are. And I think that they expect people to come in and work magic and work miracles, and that's just not the case. Like if you hire, let's say you hire somebody with 2 years of experience and they come in and you're all hot to trot and they're really good at research and they're really good at drafting content and they're really good at building media lists, but they don't they're not good at client communications yet, or they're not good at strategy. And we expect them to be that, and we forget that they only have 2 years of experience. And if they're going to get that kind of experience and be good at those kinds of things, it's up to us to coach them and mentor them to get them there. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is we expect people, no matter what experience level they have, to be able to do more and to just sort of come in and go, here, let me take all that crap off your plate and go over here and do it. And that's just not how things work, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And so I think anytime that you are saying to yourself, I don't trust this person, or you even have that inkling, like, I'm not sure I trust that person, you really need to get to the root of what that
Yep.
is.
Yep.
Because it can be that your expectations are simply mismatched, as you say, right?
Yep.
So you may be expecting far more from them than what they are capable of, either at that point or even ever. And so, you may feel like you don't trust them for that reason, in which case you need to reset what their responsibilities are. It might be that you are just a micromanager. And we've
Yeah.
talked about this a lot. You need to let go of certain things. And so that might be what you need to address. But it also might be that employee is actually not a good fit.
Yeah.
And so
Sure.
if you cannot resolve the trust issue, then you have to move on from that employee. You can't just continue to work with someone that you don't trust. You absolutely need to adjust the situation in some fashion. And if you cannot solve it, then you need to move on from that employee, because it's not fair to either of you to continue that kind of relationship. It's just doomed to fail.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. There are going to be situations where they're not a good fit. But I think if it's a year into the relationship and you don't trust the person, or the trust has eroded, then it's probably not a good fit. But if you're within the first 90 days or the first 6 months or even the first year, and you haven't built that trust and you haven't trusted that person to do their job, then I'd venture to guess the problem is usually you. And for all the reasons we've just said, right? Because as agency owners, I'm the same way. We all tend to sort of hoard things ourselves. We think the clients want to only hear from us. We don't trust other people to do things like pitch top tier media or write strategic plans or write long form content or whatever it happens to be. And we don't give up the control. We micromanage it. And so when I'm working with clients, one of the first things I look at as we start to investigate is what's happening right now. And I'm telling you, 99.9% of the time, it's the agency owner.
Yep. No, I mean, we talk about it a lot, and I know we probably shouldn't do that because our primary audience is owners, but owners are the root of most of the problems
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
we
Yes.
see. It's not actually the employees. It's that to the extent that employees are involved, it's that the expectations are wrong, the training is wrong, the management is wrong, or you hired the wrong people. And I think a good test for you is if you have a lack of trust in more than one employee at any given time, right? If you're questioning your level of trust in more than one employee, it probably is you. If it's one, maybe it's an outlier. Maybe there's an issue with that employee. But if it's multiple, then chances are you are either not setting expectations, you are not training, you are not managing, or not hiring correctly. Because keep in mind, if you've got a bad employee, it usually means you made a bad hire. And there's no shame in that. We all make bad hires. I have not made 100% perfect good hires in my life. Absolutely not. I don't know anybody who has. Even the best performing organizations have people that they let go because they didn't make a good hiring decision. So don't blame yourself too badly if you have a bad hire, but you need to solve it. You don't just keep sitting there and saying, banging your head against the wall every day saying, I can't, I got to do this all myself. I got to redo all this work because I don't trust them. I can't delegate stuff. It's just sitting on my plate. Deal with it.
Yeah, if you're hoarding the work and you can't delegate because you don't trust them, that's a big problem. So one of the things I always suggest is I actually just had this conversation about 2 weeks ago where somebody was saying, I'm having a really hard time with the person on my team getting the work done because everything that they submit isn't right. And so we dig into it and I say, okay, is it not because it's not right? Or it's because it's not the way you would word it or phrase it or the way that you would do it. And so we've discovered that it's that, right? Okay, so what are you doing to train that person? Well, I think what I need to do is I need to go in and I need to tell them exactly how to do it. No, let's not do that. Why don't you go to your one-to-one with them and say, I'm having a challenge with this. How would you solve it? And coach them through that. We've talked about asking ourselves, so what? So what is the big problem with this? Why am I having such a big challenge with this? Let's let them tell you how they're going to solve it. And then you can coach them through that. Okay, I like that approach. Maybe we should try tweaking this or changing that. Or you know what? That's a great approach. Let's do that. So instead of saying, well, you need to do this, 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 and this, which is not good for anybody, because nobody likes to be told what to do. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. You give them the opportunity to tell you what they're going to do, and you can coach them that way instead of saying, this is the way it has to be done.
Yeah, and that's so empowering to the employee by saying to them, how would you solve it, right? So they're more likely to buy into it. More importantly, it's a signal that you trust them. And believe me, employees know if they are trusted or not by you.
Absolutely. Yes.
And their performance will continue to degrade the longer they feel like you do not trust them, because they will phone it in. They will be frustrated.
Yep.
So you need to demonstrate, not just actually trust them. You need to demonstrate that trust and make sure that you're not doing things that undercuts that feeling of trust. Because the stronger the bond of trust is between the employee and the employer, the more performance you will get out of them, the better your retention of key employees will be. So, I mean, trust is just, it is glue that holds you together as a team.
Yeah, and just like any other relationship, right? Like you have trust with your partner, you have trust with your spouse, you have trust with your in your family, with your friends. Like, you can't have any relationship without trust, and it's the same thing here. How do you build that mutual trust so that you can their career thrives and your agency grows and scales and you meet all the goals that you want to meet. That's the basis to every relationship. Is you have to have that trust.
Yeah, and if you operate from that position of trust, then your default should be to assume that your employees have done things the right way.
Right.
And you should challenge yourself not to question them unless you really
Right.
have to.
Right.
Because it's really demoralizing to team members when you nitpick every little thing. And it's a good idea to sit there and say, okay, what are the most, even if there are multiple things wrong with something that they've done, a piece of writing or a project, focus on the most important ones, the ones that make the
Yep.
biggest difference. Because if I sit down with a team member and I go through 30 things that they did wrong in the last month, that's an awful conversation. It's not fun for either one of us.
No, it's not.
And
It's
even if you do
terrible.
actually trust them, that doesn't come across as constructive. That comes across as you don't trust them and you're going to tell them exactly how to do their job.
That's right.
And
That's
and
right.
you do need to think of yourself as that coach or mentor to your team. And I think we've talked about this before, but it's a real challenge for folks, particularly if you're relatively new to managing. Managers are not there to dictate what people do and how they do it and quote unquote hold them accountable, which is, I hate that when I hear I need to hold my team accountable. No, you need to trust them to do their job. You need to
Right.
tell them where to go. You need to give them the resources and training they need to get there, but you need to trust them to get there. And if they don't,
Yep.
then you sit down and figure out why, and you ask them what they would do differently. That's not holding them accountable. That's helping them. You need to be helpful and supportive to your team because if you trust them, that's what you do. You micromanage when you don't trust.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, nobody likes to be micromanaged. And one of you said something that I will repeat because I think this is really important. When I'm working with a client about once a year, I do phone calls with their direct reports just to like understand how things are going and sort of do a 360 review. It might be informal, but like understand how things are going. And one of the things that I hear pretty consistently with the clients who can't give up control and micromanage is that their team, even really senior level people who know what they're doing, stop providing their best work because they know it's just going to be redone. So they're like, yeah, I just get it off my plate. I just check it off my list and I get over there because I know that the agency owner is just going to redo it. And that's a really shitty place to be in as an employee. It doesn't make you feel good. Your morale sucks. The culture sucks. And it's a really shitty way for them to behave because of the way that you've created this problem for them not wanting to do their best work because you're just going to redo it. No one wants to work like that. No one.
No, and it doesn't make any sense for anybody to.
No.
It's a bad relationship overall and
Yes.
completely unproductive for everyone, including you as the owner.
Yes. Especially for you as the owner, because imagine, like, some of you are probably in this where you're like, I hired all these people or I hired this person to help me and I'm doing double the work. That's not the point. If you're doing double the work, you're not doing something correctly and to your point, it could be that that person's a bad hire, but I would venture to guess that 90% of that is not the reason.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's not a bad hire. It may not be an ideal hire, right? The number of A plus hires that you do is certainly going to be relatively small over the course of a
Sure.
career, right?
Yep.
But
Sure.
but most of them should be at least B's or C's. If you've got a D or an F, that should be relatively few and far between. And for most, it is relatively few and far between. But you need to sit there and ask yourself, why are you feeling compelled to do this and how can you solve it? And part of that's working with them, but part of it's also looking at yourself and what do you need to change? And to your point, as far as, doubling your work, part of the problem is that a lot of owners or even your mid-level managers, if you happen to have a mid-level tier in your agency, you're not spending enough time with those employees when they first get started. You're throwing them into the deep end of the
Yep.
pool and expecting them to be able to just do
Yep.
everything instantly
Yep.
without any training, without
Yep.
bringing them up to speed on how
Yep.
you want to do things, without trying to do a knowledge transfer between you to them. So if you're not willing to invest that up front, yeah, you're going to be doubling your work for a long time.
Yep.
because you haven't set them up for success. You need to assume when you bring someone in, and it's tough because most small agencies are really slow to hire, which is good, right? You don't want to
Yep.
overstaff and cause yourself financial problems, but because you're slow to hire, it usually means when you bring someone in, you're desperate for the extra bandwidth. And so your inclination is just to throw them in and say, eat as many hours as you can, do as much as you can to get it off my plate. I need relief. But that relief needs to wait. You can't get relief until they get up to speed. Until then, you're
Yeah.
going to have to invest extra time in them to set them up for that success.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that we talk about, I have this group of PACEL model certified guides. It's 10 agency owners that are in there that are going through the PACEL model program so that they can then graduate and become a guide for the PACEL model to other agency owners and businesses. And one of the things that we talk about pretty consistently in that group is standard operating procedures, having your processes written down or video or whatever it happens to be. And the biggest pushback I hear on that, which is understandable, is that I don't have time because I'm running the business and I'm doing HR and which is true. But to your point, without those SOPs, without the onboarding, without the time spent up front, you're not going to get out of employees what you need ever. So it does take time, but it's one of the most important things that you can do to build into a company that's going to grow so that you can hire and onboard employees the correct way. And so what I challenge this group to do is let's take one thing at a time. So when you're doing your work, click Zoom or Loom or whatever video platform you want and screen share and show the work as you're doing it, right? Like there are things that you can create tutorials for as you're already doing it. Just record yourself doing it. So create those tutorials and allow people that then you can share the videos and you can say, okay, as you're doing this, this is how we do things. This is where you can find this. This is where you can find that. Here's the document for that. And have it all so that they can easily find it and do it in a video tutorial, which is one of the easiest ways you can create your SOPs. And that's probably the best way to start to build into something, a library that you can then say to an employee as you're onboarding them, great, what I'd like you to start with is this, and here's everything you're going to need to be able to get started. Go ahead and get started with that. Come to me with any questions, and then we'll move on to the next. And that's a really good way to onboard them in an efficient way that allows them to get up to speed really quickly so that they can relieve you from a lot of the stuff you're doing.
Yeah, and I really want to underscore what you said about picking one thing at a time. It is so much easier to make progress if you focus on one thing at a time. And it's very, I think I've mentioned this before when I used to train new umpires for baseball, we would always tell them, pick one thing each game to work on, and it can be something really simple. It doesn't have to be an elaborate, detailed thing. I mean, it might be just make sure you take the mask off with your left hand every single time, left hand every single time. And until you nail that, don't go working on the next thing. But if you do that and you focus on that one thing per game, you'll make great progress very rapidly. And your employees are the same way. If you give them a focused thing to work on, they will improve. Or not, in which case that gives you feedback and information you need to know as well, that they're either not capable of that particular thing, and so you need to rethink what their assignments are, or again, perhaps they're not a good fit overall. But I think to me the key thing is the very moment that you think to yourself, I don't trust this person, I don't have trust in this person, or worse, once you say it, you've already been thinking it for a while. So as soon as you hear yourself telling that to someone else, whether that's a friend, a spouse, a colleague, a coach, whatever, as soon as you verbalize it, you know you have a serious problem, and your focus needs to be, how do I address this? Because if you don't address it, if you're not at least making progress on that trust issue, that relationship is doomed to failure. So don't just brush it off and say, I can't really trust them, and then move on. You can't. That needs to be a giant stop sign, a red light in front of you that says you need to fix something right now.
Yeah. And you're right. You go through all the things, and it might very well be that the person is not the right fit, but go through all the things first.
Yeah, and they might just not be a fit for the role that they're currently sitting in. They might still be a good contributor to your team. You might just have put them, square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
And it might just be one aspect of what they do, right? You might be able to just shave it off, and then they all of a sudden fit in the right slot.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think figuring out what we can do differently is one of the first steps, and then move on to the next.
Absolutely.
And I'm just as guilty of it. Like,
Yeah. I mean, the thing is with this show, we talk from experience, right? And we're
yeah,
pretty much just sharing the things we've screwed up over the years. So,
correct.
even though you as listeners may feel like we're beating up on you on a regular basis, we're beating up on ourselves first for the mistakes we've made, and now hoping that we can prevent some of you from making them
For making the same ones. Yeah.
either at all or as often
Right.
or
Yeah.
whatever. So,
Yeah.
if we made no mistakes, we'd have nothing to talk about here.
That's true.
So, with that will draw to an end this episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
I'm Ginny Dietrich.
And it depends.